Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to start today's lecture on Toni Cade Bambara and the lesson. It's a pretty short little story, but kind of fun. Little Sylvia is kind of a hoot to be in her head for a while. Just briefly, you can Google, and you should Google Toni Cade Bambara, and you can see on her Wikipedia page. We're kind of getting in our mode of thinking about comparison and contrast papers. So we have a lot of things in here that we've seen before. Okay, um, uh, Bambara was born in Harlem. She was born Miltona Mirkin Cade, but she changed her name to Toni and her surname to Bambara as a nod to her African heritage, and she felt that she was now complete because she had a name that she chose. Now, who does that sound like to you? Okay, like D. Okay, D did the same thing for the same reasons. Okay, Bambara is an African name, and during the same time period, this the story was published in '72. Everyday use was '73, so right in that same era where you had the same kind of stuff going on. So you can look at these two authors, Alice Walker and Bambara, as being kind of cut from the same cloth, so to speak. Okay, she was as Alice Walker, she was heavily involved in civil rights, feminism, and community activism. And so, obviously, a racial reading of this is imperative because she absolutely wants you to get that. But there's more going on here. And we'll talk a little bit about a class reading of this or a Marxist reading of it because she does allude to a couple of things in here that are still relevant today, as a matter of fact. So the lesson, as it were, takes place in Harlem, as does Sonny's Blues, the place. Now remember, Harlem is emblematic, okay, not just of sort of a black community, but it's the black community. Remember, Harlem is a very famous, very storied, mythological sort of place. And so the fact that even though Cade did live in Harlem, it's important that she still sets it there because it is sort of it represents the larger black community as a whole. So as Sonny's Blues takes place in Harlem, published in '72, similar to Everyday Use. So you have the same kind of ground we're going over here, okay? And our little narrator is Sylvia, okay? And she's a hoot. She is opinionated. She is a talker. She absolutely knows who she is and does not suffer fools lightly. Okay, so but the question is she reliable? Okay, she's a little girl, so how reliable is she? Okay, like most children, she thinks she knows everything. Welcome to my world. Did it? Miss Moore, though, the other character that's important here, think about who she is and what she does for the community. She's single, she's young, and she takes it upon herself to take these kids under her wing. Now, the question is, are the parents paying her? Does she do this out of the goodness of her own heart? But there is one thing that's something you want to think about is the fact that the neighborhood makes fun of her for being educated. And again, we have another character, just like Sonny's brother, who is staying in the community and helping the community that he grew up in, just like Miss Moore is. So, looking at those two characters, can you see some parallels that you might could scare up a topic out of? Okay, so there's a lot of stuff going on here, and I want you to notice these things, these parallels, because that's what a comparison and contrast paper is really about. Okay, but think about why the neighborhood makes fun of her. Okay, and you want to maybe Google this. Okay, anti-intellectualism. This is an attitude towards learning and towards higher education, towards science and expertise that does not trust it, thinks that it somehow makes someone think that they're better than somebody else. And remember from Everyday Use, Dee would do this, right? Dee would lord her, I think, would lord her knowledge over Mama and Maggie, like somehow keeping them in their place, like they were too ignorant to understand. So this is a thing, okay, and we see this today. We see this today with denial of any kind of climate change, with the dismantling of scientific knowledge. This is still going on, okay, and what is up with that? Okay, it's a thing, but why is it a thing? Okay, maybe look at that. Okay, anti-intellectualism. And the other place we want to think about here that's very important is FAO Schwarz. Okay, and I'm not sure if you guys know this. It's kind of the dear departed Toys R Us. FAO Schwarz for many years. If you ever saw the movie Big, okay, if you can just Google it right now, Google Tom Hanks Big piano scene or something like that. It's the scene, if you've seen the movie, where Tom Hanks and Robert Loggia, who he owns a toy store, do a little duet where they dance on the keyboard and do a Heart and Soul or whatever. Okay, so FAO Schwarz, much like Harlem, is not a black neighborhood, it's the black neighborhood. FAO Schwarz is not just any toy store, it is the toy store. Okay, I think it just closed in New York City because the rent got too high. But when you thought of a toy store, this was the magical land that you thought of. Okay, everything you can imagine was just it was like a utopia for children before there was the Toys R Us kind of thing. And again, they're gone now. But so FAO Schwarz it represents almost like this. This magical land that these kids go to, that obviously they can't afford anything there, and that's the important thing to remember here. Okay, but what is the lesson she's trying to teach? And there's a couple things I want to read for you guys here. Okay, one is on page. If you want to look at your books or take a look at it on page 279. The very bottom of the page when they're talking about the money here. $35 could buy new bunk beds for Junior and Gretchen's boy. $35 and the whole household could go visit Granddaddy Nelson in the country. $35 would pay for the rent and the piano bill too. Who are these people that spend that much for performing clowns and $1,000 for toy sailboats? What kind of work do they do, and how do they live, and how come we ain't in on it? Where we are is who we are. Okay, says Miss Moore, always pointing out. But it don't necessarily have to be that way, she always adds, then waits for somebody to say that poor people have to wake up and demand their share of the pie. Think about that. She says that poor people have to wake up and demand their share of the pie, and don't none of us know what kind of pie she's talking about in the first damn place. Okay, think about what that means. That means that somewhere there is a pie, okay, that you get a piece of, right? It's out there and you're supposed to get some of it. Some people would call that income redistribution, okay? We hear a lot of this these days with democratic socialism and socialism. That's what that sounds like, is that I want my piece of it, okay? That's one way to look at how things are, okay? Now, further down on page 280, Miss Moore again says, imagine for a minute what kind of society it is in which some people can spend on a toy boat what it would cost to feed a family of 6 or 7. What do you think? I think, says Sugar, pushing me off her feet like she'd never done, because I'll whip her ass in a minute, that this is not much of a democracy, if you ask me. Equal chance to pursue happiness means an equal crack at the dough, don't it? Now that's different than having this pie that is arbitrarily divided up and you get a piece of it. And this, okay, one more time. Equal chance to pursue happiness means an equal crack at the dough, don't it? Now, what is the difference between those two worldviews right there? Okay, it's subtle, but it means something. Okay, it doesn't mean that you have to go out and pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but it does mean that the system needs to be equitable, and that's the problem, isn't it? Okay, so we have a lot of things that we're talking about right now on a national level, on a personal level, across the kitchen table that have to do with the exact same thing that Bambara is talking about through the lens of race, okay, and culture in the 1970s. But how much has really changed? I'm going to answer that for you. Nothing has changed, okay? So we still have the problem. In fact, it's even worse than it is now, okay? It's even worse now than it was then, let's put it that way, okay? So these stories continue to give back, okay? They continue to be relevant because nothing ever changes. And so, maybe the lesson of the lesson here is that we need to kind of figure it out. I don't know. Okay. But certainly, just looking at this particular story and this author, we have seen this stuff before. Okay. And so, easily get 5-7 pages out of this. Okay. If you wanted to take a look at some of the things I've mentioned. Okay. So, I will see you guys soon, and stay safe and wash your hands.